Welcome teachers to today's video on what is a PSP. In today's video we will discuss using a PSP to better understand and plan instruction for your English language learners. The content objectives for today's video will be to understand how to read a PSP and to understand the following academic terms: PSP, LEP, RFEP, pull-out, push-in, consultative, content ESL, access, WIDA Can Do Descriptors, PSYOP, accommodations, modification, and language objectives. After today's video, hopefully you will have not only a better understanding of what a PSP is, but how you can use the information within that document to better plan and make information and content accessible for your English language learners. Let's start with the Program Service Plan. It's also called the PSP. This document is the school's plan for how to help English language learners all year in class and on test. In a PSP, we use information from tests, from parents, and from you, the teachers, to decide what should be in the PSP. A PSP is used for 1 year only, and then a new PSP is made at the beginning of the next year. This is what the top of your PSP should look like. There are several things that you're going to want to make note of. Not only your student's name, their information, but you'll also note that you get access to the student's native language, where their birth country is. You also have access to what is called the EL status and the EL services. That is all located at the top of your English Learners Service Plan. In addition to that, you'll be able to identify your student's teacher or English learner provider. And under that, you'll notice the English Proficiency test scores, and we will discuss these in depth. So you'll notice under their name, it says what test they were giving, and we'll talk about each of those tests. We'll talk about what proficiency scores are and what those levels are. Students are tested from a level 1 to a level 6, 1 being entering, or what you often refer to as newcomers, and 6 being those students we consider proficient or reaching proficiency, those students who exit the English Learner Program. Let's start with EL status. On your PSPs, as you note the student's EL status, you will see a term LEP. LEP means that the student is in the English Language Learner Program and she or he can get extra help at school. All LEP students have a PSP. Students will have an RFEP status when they get a target score on the Access, that's the testing scores, when they get a target score on the Access test score above a 5. A student, once they are RFEP, or as you often hear us refer to as tested out, that does not mean that the student is yet ready to stand alone or be on their own. The school will monitor, or your English learner teacher will monitor, the LEP student for 2 more years to monitor progress and to see how they are doing in their English learner progress. That often means consulting with teachers within the classroom, monitoring their grades and their progress within classrooms, and ensuring that they are not continuing to struggle in their content and academic language development. If you have a student who has a PSP, those students are considered language learners, LEP students, and those students have active accommodations. Within the PSP, there are 5 types of EL services. The first service that you may note is pull-out service. Pull-out service means that your English language learner student will be pulled out of the regular content classroom and will be taught extra lessons or differentiated lessons by an English learner teacher. So that means I call for you, or there's a scheduled resource time for that student. They come out from the content classroom and they get small group and side-by-side or one-on-one instruction with their English learner teacher. Push-in is when English learner students are placed within a regular content classroom, and the English learner teacher goes into that regular content classroom and helps that student with their work and with the academic language. We often sometimes refer to this as collaborative or co-teaching. So push-in is what you would refer to as collaborative or co-teaching. Sheltered English instruction is when English language learners are placed within the regular classroom without collaborative or co-teaching of an English language learner, and the responsibility of the instruction is placed on the regular content teacher to help that English language learner with their work and with their instruction. This often can result in the need for the next service, which is consultative collaboration. This means that the English learner teacher is not in the student's classroom, but often consults with the student's teachers, talks to those teachers, and collaborates in a more indirect type of setting with those teachers in order to help teachers form instructional goals and make academic content comprehensible for the English learner. The last EL service is Content ESL. Content ESL is a class that is specific for English language learners, taught by an English learner teacher, specifically to improve English language acquisition or instruction. Often you will get content taught in the ESL class, but it's taught with the intention of also improving English language acquisition. Beneath your English language services on your PSP, you will see a section called English Proficiency Test Scores. In the state of Kentucky, we give the Access test. For 6th through 12th graders, Access is the English test that students take every year in January. The students can score anywhere from a 1, which is where we often rank our newcomers, all the way up to a 6, which is the highest score. This is the score that will language learners as RFEP, or proficient in English. A student who scores a 5 across the board in our district is considered proficient in the program, and they are considered RFEP, and they begin monitoring status for 2 years. For newcomers, we have a test also called the W-APT, or as it's delightfully called, the WAPT test. The WAPT test is a test given to first-year students who come into the school system for the first time. This test asks students to listen, speak, read, and write in English for us for the first time, and this test allows us to benchmark students' progress in English skills so that we can determine services. If your PSP states that the student has taken the WAPT test, it means the student has been in our school system or in the United States for less than 1 year, and they have not yet taken the state testing for Access. Beneath your state scores, you're going to see what's called a WIDA Can Do Descriptor. These are the descriptors that help teachers to understand what students already know in English and to help give ideas for what the students can do in class. Hence the reason they are labeled the Can Do descriptors. These can be critical markers in a PSP for teachers when planning instruction. The Can Do descriptors are taken from the Access scores and the rubrics for English, reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And so teachers should pay close attention to these when planning content instruction and determining language objectives for students. If you look at the Can Do descriptors, it will tell you at this level of performance a student is expected to be able to. And that means within these descriptors, students are able to do these specific activities in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. It is very important for teachers to consider when teaching academic content that they do not work above a student's language ability. Language that is incomprehensible makes academic acquisition incomprehensible. For example, if a student is only able to match data or information with its source or genre, and you are asking students to do analytical questions that are above that skill range, students are not able to do that language task. And so it makes the academic task you're requesting out of their comprehension range. When considering accommodations for English language learners, there are two types of accommodations on your PSP: the PSYOP accommodations and the additional accommodations. PSYOP is an empirically validated program of instruction that is designed to make academic content understandable for English learners. It is research-based and supported, and so PSYOP strategies are first and foremost the strategies we recommend teachers consider when planning instruction for their students. The first PSYOP strategy that may appear on your PSP is to provide content objectives. These are learning targets. Most of us are accustomed to providing learning targets or what academic content that students need to learn. It is important to understand that just providing the learning target is not enough. We need to explain that learning target in simplified and understandable language to English language learners so they understand what it is that they are trying to learn. The second PSYOP accommodation is to provide a language objective. This is very important and very connected to the Can Do standards. A language objective tells what English language students need to learn in order to accomplish the learning target or the content objective. So again, you have a content objective, which is your academic content, and then you have a language objective, which is the language that students will need in order to accomplish the academic content. So if you want students to learn and express and demonstrate knowledge and perform tasks, what English will they need in order to do that? And the best way to find that language ability or level is to look to your Can Do standards. The next PSYOP accommodation is to link instruction to prior learning. For English learners, it's critical that we make connections to their prior knowledge or their cultural connections in order for us to clarify meaning to content and for to plan instruction. It's important to consider when information is going in for English language learners, can they make connections to things that they know already or to cultural connections that they already understand? If they do not know or do not understand connections, can we build background knowledge? The next SIAP accommodation is, what do your English learners already know and what do they need to know? Prior education and prior backgrounds are not always consistent with education in American schools, and so we'll have to consider background gaps and the absence of education for English language learners. The next accommodation for SIAP is to provide visuals and organizers. While these are common practice in many American classrooms, it is critical and important to use pictures, images, graphs, and visuals for English language learners, as these support language learning and comprehension. In addition to using visual organizers, the SIAP strategy of interaction and academic conversations are also important. Students need the opportunity for interaction and discussion. It's important for English language learners to talk with each other. So the opportunity for collaboration and interaction is important within the classroom, especially for English language learners. The use of things like talk partners, collaborative group work, peer partners, and mentoring can be critical in language acquisition as well as academic acquisition. The use of the SIAP strategy of engaging in academic conversation also means the need for modeling language instruction for students. Students not only need to talk with other students within the classroom, but they also need models of language instruction. They need teachers and other students to model academic conversations, how to talk in collaborative settings, how to use academic writing and academic conversations. And so things like sentence starters and talk moves can also be used within your classroom to assist English language learners with engaging in academic conversations. Some of the other accommodations that you might see on your PSP for your students includes modeling language and task completion. Sometimes not only do we model language, but we also model what a task would look like if it is finished or done correctly. This helps students to see what they are expected to do, giving examples, showing, modeling completed questions. Simplifying language, especially for early language learners and newcomers, using another word that a student may already know or simplifying language will help with comprehension to ensure that students understand what it is that they're expected to do. Adapting the pace of instruction will always be important, as slowing some things down and teaching them again will be important as students are acquiring new language and growing vocabularies for the first time. It is especially important as teachers of English language students that we understand that the pace of our voices matters, and so that sometimes slowing down just the pace of our talk and the pace of our voices will help students understand. Scaffolding is very important, not only scaffolding responses and giving the students a few words to get started, but also scaffolding activities or chunking activities in pieces so that students can work in steps is important. Also, scaffolding in terms of assistance, providing more help and then slowly taking help away as students become independent is important for English language learners as they grow in their self-confidence and their self-assurance in English learning and in academic content. And finally, teaching students to use thinking strategies and metacognition can be very important, especially for students who have grown up in schools and academic institutions that don't instill independent thinking and metacognitive learning. For your assessment accommodations in the classroom, it'll be important to consider that accommodations that are not provided in the classroom will also not be provided on state assessments. So you may note that it's necessary because of state assessments to provide the same sort of accommodations in the classroom. Your student may require a reader when given summative assessments and maybe even sometimes formative assessments. They may require extra time, either time and a half or double time when taking assessments. They may be provided the opportunity to use resources such as bilingual dictionaries or even electronic bilingual resources. And individual and small testing groups are also sometimes required for formative and summative, especially for newcomer groups. In the accommodations sections, you will have a note on your PSP. If a student has an IEP, that means your student is not only identified as an English language learner, but a student who gets help from a special education teacher. Then the student will have the same accommodations on their PSP as on their IEP. There's a crossover or an importance to share those accommodations so that if a student's required to have a reader, the PSP will also note that that student gets a reader. For summative accommodations on state assessments, students who have been identified less than 1 year as English language learners are not accountable fully in state accountability assessments. So it's important for you to know that students are exempt from state testing for the first year of language acquisition. However, they should still be given the accommodations of a reader. They should still be given their extended time accommodations. If your PSP mandates and shows that the student is getting state accommodations for testing, you should still use those accommodations, even if you know they're a newcomer, and they will not be participating fully in state assessments for the first year. It's important to have students become accustomed to their accommodations and how to use those accommodations and how to test within those testing environments. So you'll see the list of instructional accommodations. You can have as few as 1 or 2. You can have as many as 15. The accommodations are there for teachers to use. Although it is not expected that the teachers use every accommodation every day, if the accommodations are listed, then it is expected that the accommodations at some point are being incorporated into the daily classroom instructions. The program service plan accommodations for state testing are mandated to be provided throughout the year as well as during testing sessions. That means during any standardized testing, all testing accommodations have to be implemented in the classroom in order to be implemented within standardized testing zones. If a teacher has not been implementing extended time throughout the year, a student will not be given extended time at the end of the year during state-mandated standardized testing. So, the classroom teacher, the EL teacher, the parent, the principal all sign the PSP. PSPs are legal documents, and they should be implemented with all classrooms and learning environments. They are a responsibility of the English learner teacher, of the content teachers, and they are accountable at both the school level, the district level, and the state level. If you have questions regarding your PSP and all the different parts of your PSP, you should sit and meet more closely with your English learner teacher and discuss the various parts and how you can implement those can-do standards as well as those accommodations within your content academic classroom. If you would like additional resources on making content comprehensible for your English language learners, the SIOP model or how to design SIOP lesson plans, please use the resource provided on this slide. If you'd like more information regarding designing instruction for your content classes and using your PSP, please contact me personally